back to the story time. This is chapter 4.
Of?
Yes, it's totally not Spielberg. Of How to Be a Hero by the book. That is the name of that's a subtitle. No. And this is chapter 4, Two Birds in the Bush.
Ew.
It was time for Hawk to kill a loafer. It passed time, in fact. He had spent most of the second day in Siegburg wandering fruitlessly through the woods. At noon, he'd cleaned the stables again to earn a night's rest, and then gone back to loafer hunting. He'd had no luck. Realizing almost too late that the sun was setting, he'd been forced to race back to town with his day's goal unmet. So far, today wasn't looking much better. The problem wasn't that he couldn't find a loafer. The woods were lousy with them, and their size and purplish color made them easy to spot. The problem was that those darn things were fast. From what Hawk could see of them, which was very little and very briefly, the usefulness of their large hind legs more than made up for their spindly forearms. Today Hawk had made up his mind that he was not going to return to the Adventurers Guild until he had slain something. Wolfgang had said that hunting loafers would be a good start for an inexperienced adventurer, so there had to be a simple way to catch one. Hawk found it a little frustrating that he had to do this without any kind of training. Page 7 of How to Be a Hero clearly stated that there would be experienced adventurers at the guild hall to teach and give advice, but the only advice this guild master seemed to have was, go home. Hawk's thoughts were interrupted as he suddenly spotted a loafer not far north of the western road. Its purple scales stood out luridly from the surrounding fir trees. Hawk started to reach for his sword. Then he decided to try the alternate plan that he'd come up with late last night. Al would have called it Plan B. Al always had a Plan B. Loafers, Hawk had discovered, didn't stroll along at a leisurely pace. They either stood still, waiting for rodents or large bugs to wander in range of their long, snapping necks, or they ran like mad. This particular loafer wasn't running yet. As Hawk edged closer, trying to muffle his steps in the fir needles, he could see the loafer's bright black eyes and his bird-like movements of his small, sleek head. When it straightened its body to snap a large caterpillar from a branch, its nose reached up almost as high as Hawk's shoulder. Then it went back to its half-crouched posture, looking almost comically stealthy as it whipped its head back and forth in search of a second helping. Suddenly it froze, eyes wide and unblinking. Hawk knew that look. It meant it had sensed him and was about to flee. Hawk quickly picked up a large rock and heaved it with all his strength. The rock hurled through the air and struck the loafers hard on the shoulder to make it shriek of pain. Hawk swore under his breath. He had meant to hit it on the head. Now it would surely run. The loafer did run. Directly at him, hissing furiously. Aha! Hawk thought, drawing his sword and clasping the hilt with both hands. The trick is to make it mad. The loafer had an amazingly supple neck, and it shot its head forward to bite Hawk's shoulder before he had time to react. Those teeth really hurt. Hawk thrust out his sword, trying to connect with the loafer's abdomen. Its skin looked softer and pale there, it temptingly vulnerable. The beast was quick, though, and Hawk wasn't used to brandishing the heavy weapon he carried. The loafer sank its teeth into Hawk's upper arm before he could retract the sword. Crying out in pain, Hawk jerked his arm away, then backed up a few steps. Apparently, quick thrusts didn't work too well against a loafer. It was amazingly agile when it came to moving back and forth. But how was it at moving side to side? Ignoring the pain in his arm, Hawk hewed the air with a mighty two-handed swing. The loafer easily ducked and tried to bite Hawk's middle. Unfortunately for the loafer, its teeth caught in Hawk's belt. It tried to worry itself loose, and Hawk was shaken off balance by the motion. Trying to keep from falling, Hawk stepped on the loafer's toes. The creature jerked loose from Hawk's belt and reared its head backwards in pain. Hawk swung his sword. Thwack! The blade connected with the side of the Loffer's neck, nearly beheading it. The creature instantly fell toward Hawk, a hot fountain of blood erupting from its throat. Then it collapsed to the ground. It took a moment for Hawk to realize what he had done. When it hit him, a rush of joy shot straight up his spine, and he leaped into the air, waving his bloodied sword. "I did it!" he cried aloud. Then he took off, running like a Loffer toward the town. "I did it! I did it!" he cried again when he reached his destination. His shout was loud enough to wake the guildmaster, who was sleeping by the fire. "What?" said the old man, confused and startled at the sight of Hawk's drawn sword and the blood drying on his clothes. "What has happened? Do the brigands attack the town?" "I killed a Loffer," Hawk said. Wolfgang blinked, his vision seeming to clear. "Ah, so it is, Hawk, the young would-be adventurer. You are lucky you did not run into something more dangerous than that nuisance creature." "You said it was a bounty," Hawk reminded him. "Yeah," said Wolfgang, "if you could call it a bounty. Didn't used to be a bounty at all till they started swiping baby goats right out from under their mothers. 6 mond is just a trifle, if you ask me." 6 mond? He wouldn't have to clean the stable tonight, and he'd have a coin left over to save for the sword lesson. Shamin had explained to him that gold coins, sonnen, were worth 10 mon each, so that left 9 more for Hawk to save. "That's quite enough bounty for me," said Hawk happily, interrupting the rambling dwarf. "Fine," said Wolfgang. "Show me the head, and you shall have your bounty." "The head?" Hawk stood in bafflement, his sword drooping to the ground. "Yeah, where is it?" Attached to the Loffer, mostly." "You did not bring back the head?" Wolfgang rubbed his eyes with one hand, sighing heavily. "How do you think that bounties are earned, son? If I paid everyone who said they killed something, everyone in town would have slain a troll." "But look at me," said Hawk. "If all this blood were mine, I'd be dead." "Yeah, what you say is no doubt true, but I must take the heads to the castle so that Karl can repay the guild from the Baron's treasury. That is the way things work. If you hurry, though, you may be able to find the head of your Loffer before the carrion birds tear it to shreds." Hawk ground his teeth in frustration. "All right," he said, "I'll hurry." Hawk hurried. So preoccupied he was with hurrying and with being angry that he almost plowed right into his brother on the western road. Stunned, he skidded to a halt. It was Falcon. For real this time. He might also almost have been a mirror, though, for the look of utter shock and dismay on his face. He had his shield with him, and it shone pure white even under the cloud-filtered afternoon sunlight. For a moment, the two of them just stared at each other. "You're bleeding," Falcon said at last. Hawk looked down at himself. "This isn't my blood, not most of it, anyway." He felt strangely giddy, almost shy. He hadn't realized until now that he'd been hoping that Falcon would come. "Whose blood is it?" said Falcon in horror. "What have you done?" Hawk's giddiness quickly faded at the familiar note of disapproval in his brother's voice. "For heaven's sakes, Falcon, it's none of your concern. What are you doing here anyway?" "I came to bring you back." "Bring me back?" Hawk snorted. "I told you I was coming back in the note. You were supposed to wait." "There's no time for this, Hawk. It's almost time for the spring pasturing. We have to convince the elders that Owl should stay as the town's herbalist." "Oh, come on, Falcon. You know they'll never trust a 14-year-old boy with a job like that. Get your head out of the clouds and face reality." "You're the one who ran off from reality," retorted Falcon. "We need you in Alpendorf." Hawk drew his sword and hacked at a nearby sapling in frustration. "None of us are needed in Alpendorf," he snapped. "That's the point. I'm going to earn money here as an adventurer, so we don't have to be shepherds." Falcon's face betrayed his surprise. "Earn money as an adventuress, you? Hawk, You know nothing about being an adventurer." Hawk sheathed his sword violently. "This is exactly why I didn't tell you I was coming here in person. I don't have time to stand here and argue with you. I've got to get 5 mon to stay at the inn, and while we're standing here, my 6 mon bounty is probably being eaten away by the ravens." "What are you talking about?" Falcon said, looking confused. "It's about some of that adventuring stuff that I'm so ignorant about," Hawk said irritably. He looked at Falcon's shadow, which was pointing east. Hawk swore. "Look how late it's getting. I don't have time to clean the stables and find the head. It had better still be there." "Find the head of what?" "The head of the monster I killed." "You actually killed a monster?" Hawk couldn't tell if Falcon was appalled or impressed. "I did, and it's going to have its head, and I'm going to bring it back to town and earn my bounty. But I have to do it now, or it'll be gone." Falcon frowned in obvious disapproval, but asked, "What can I do to help?" Hawk started to tell him to go back home, then suddenly got an idea. "Go into town," he said. "Ask the sheriff at the west gate to direct you to the Hero's Tail Inn. From there you can see the castle. If you put in a few hours' work at the castle stables and give the money you earn to the innkeeper, we can both sleep safely tonight, and you can be on your way in the morning." "But the monster," protested Falcon. "You shouldn't face it alone." "The monster's dead, dummy. I just have to cut its head off. The last thing I need is you getting sick all over my boots. That's the one thing I haven't had all over me in the past couple of days." Falcon looked as though he wanted to say more. Hawk, though, knew that he would just give in. "All right," Falcon said at last. "I'll meet you at the inn when you're finished, and we can talk then. But if you're not back by sundown, I'm coming after you." "Fine," said Hawk, and left Falcon standing on the road. Cursing creatively under his breath, Hawk hurried back towards the spot where he'd killed the loafer. Falcon certainly knew how to throw a dead rat into the well water, didn't he? This wasn't exactly what Hawk had been thinking of when he hoped Falcon would come. He wanted him to be excited, to share the dream, to cheer him on. But having Falcon here to sullenly disapprove of him was worse than being alone. First thing in the morning, he'd have to have a talk with him. Hawk stopped in surprise as he found the site of his victory. Something had gotten there first. 2 purple, scaly somethings, huddled together with their long necks bowed to the ground over their fallen comrade. It took a minute for Hawk to realize they weren't mourning the dead loafer. They were eating it. "Shoo!" he cried, waving his sword at them. They looked up, raising their lean, wicked heads at exactly the same time. They were both bigger than the one he'd killed, and they didn't look as though they wanted their dinner interrupted. Hawk considered himself a natural fighter. He'd beaten Gunnar after all, not because of training, but because of his instincts. Right now, those instincts were telling him that he was about to join the 2 loafers for dinner, and not as a guest. 1 sword against 2 monsters. This was not a difficult math problem. "Falcon!" he bellowed at the top of his lungs. Then the first loafer attacked. Falcon heard his brother's cry and took off running toward the sound, hollow inside with sudden anxiety. If Hawk was asking for help, it had to be serious. Falcon found Hawk backed up against the trunk of a large pine tree, swinging his sword wildly and dodging the bites of the 2 sinewy reptilian monsters. "Get one of those loafers off me!" Hawk yelled him back. "How?" "I don't care, just do it." Falcon tried to think. All he had with him was his cloth satchel and the shield. No, he couldn't think. He had to do something. In desperation, he lifted the shield and clubbed the nearest loafer on the back of the head with it. Instantly, the creature turned on Falcon in a rage. "Just keep it away until I kill this one," Hawk panted. Falcon felt fear start to course through his veins like icy water, numbing him, slowing his limbs. He wasn't going to be any help to Hawk if he gave in to it. He forced himself to concentrate on the attacking loafer. The creature was quick, but Falcon blocked its sharp teeth with his shield. It hissed sharply, dodging to the left, and struck at Falcon again. Falcon pivoted his shield and once again deflected the Laufer's attack. Lowering its head, the Laufer snapped at Falcon's legs. Falcon almost clubbed it again inadvertently as he moved the shield down. The Laufer hissed in obvious frustration and suddenly swung around to attack Hawk instead of Falcon. Once again, Falcon bashed at the animal with the shield, hard enough to make it shriek in pain. He couldn't draw back quickly enough from the blow, and felt the painful scrape of teeth along his arm. Before he'd fully recovered, a streaking flash of steel forced him to jump backwards. A wild swing from Hawk's sword had just missed Falcon. While Falcon was distracted, the Laufer closed on him. Falcon barely managed to get his shield in front of his snapping teeth. Out of the corner of his eye, Falcon saw Hawk's Laufer crumble to the ground. Then he had to duck as Hawk's sword nearly severed the second Laufer's head and kept right on coming. Falcon felt the whoosh of the blade passing close enough to ruffle his hair, and then he felt himself drenched in something very, very warm. Blood. Falcon's hands went numb. He heard his shield fall to the ground. Cold sweat prickled his forehead. Hawk approached him, but his voice sounded as though it were 1,000 miles away. Falcon felt a hand on his shoulder. "Hey, are you all right?" Abruptly, Falcon doubled over and deposited his breakfast all over Hawk's clumsy, worn-out boots. By the time Falcon recovered, Hawk had already collected the 3 Laufer heads. Falcon's legs were still a bit shaky, but he had recovered his shield and clutched it to his chest. Having dropped it bothered him more than having embarrassed himself. They headed back to town with Falcon leading the way. Hawk followed at a good distance behind with the 3 heads cradled in his arms. As they approached the gate, he cleared his throat. Don't turn around. They're all bloody. I don't want you getting sick again. I'm going to take these to the Adventurers Guild Hall. You talk to Sheriff Meisterson and get directions to the inn, then just meet me there. We need to talk." "Yes, we do," Falcon agreed, looking down as they began to cross a footbridge over a small stream. "But I'm going to try and rinse off a bit first," he decided. "Outside? In this weather? You're nuts." "I don't want to introduce myself to the sheriff of the town covered in blood," Falcon said. "Suit yourself," said Hawk. Then he continued toward the town. Falcon stepped off the bridge and found a place where the stream bank sloped gently into the water. He tensed before wading into the stream, but found, to his surprise, that it was warm, shallow, and had the fragrance of wild strawberries. He knelt down in the water fully clothed and rubbed the worst of the gore off his face, arms, and body. He felt a stab of guilt at fouling the pristine water. But when he looked over his shoulder, expecting to see a cloud of dark blood and brought downstream, his eyes widened in wonder. A profusion of tiny scarlet blossoms floated away on the surface of the water, which remained perfectly, sweetly clear. "Magic," thought Falcon with awe. He watched as the flowers drifted out of sight. Then he cupped his hands and drank deeply from the stream, savoring its sweetness. At last he rose and crossed to the far side. The moment he stepped out of the stream, the cold returned in force. Falcon shook his head fiercely to dry his hair and wrung out his clothes as best he could, but the fact remained that he was soaking wet, and it was the middle of March in southern Creedland. There was nothing to be done. Sodden and shivering, he entered the town through the western gate. The sheriff, easily recognizable by the fancy embroidery he wore, sat alone on the porch of a red brick building. When he saw Falcon, his eyes grew wide with surprise. "I have finally lost my mind," he said. "Didn't you just run by here with a bunch of Laufer heads?" Falcon smiled. "That was my brother Hawk. I'm Falcon." "Twins!" said the sheriff with relief. "Well, I'm afraid it'll be a challenge to tell you apart." Falcon's smile faltered. It won't be necessary, Sheriff Meisterson, he said. I'm hoping Hawk and I will be leaving first thing tomorrow morning. Ah, come to fetch him, have you? Said the sheriff, nodding with approval. Best thing for both of you, really. Falcon sighed. He's not going to want to leave. Well, you best say your prayers for him, then. What do you mean by that? Falcon felt a chill that had nothing to do with his wet clothes. Sheriff shook his head and his shoulders slumped wearily. Siegburg is not what it used to be 20 years ago, lad, he said. There are no adventurers here. The smart ones stayed away, and the other ones don't last long. This is an ill-fated place. In what way? Said Falcon uneasily. In every way, said the sheriff. For example, there is a crazy kobold in town setting fires right and left. When the bakery caught fire, it blew like a thunderclap. There were pieces of it lying all around the streets. Is there nothing anyone can do? The sheriff sighed. I've sent my assistant Otto after that kobold time and time again, but there's no catching him. He just vanishes the moment you lay eyes on him. And that's just the latest in a long string of problems around here. Does Hawk know anything about this? Said Falcon, fighting the hollow dread that crept into his bones. I doubt it, said the sheriff wryly. He doesn't ever seem to have time to listen. I'll have to tell him. Surely he won't stay if he knows there's real danger. Falcon heard the doubt in his own voice and saw it mirrored in the sheriff's eyes. I'll have to convince him somehow, Falcon insisted. If the other adventurers are all dead... He left the sentence unfinished. Sheriff Meisterson gave Falcon a long appraising look. I like you, Falcon, he said. I like the way you ask questions and listen to the answers. That, if anything, is the key to surviving in this world. If you can teach Hawk to that lesson, he might live to be my age. I'm supposed to meet him at the inn, Falcon said. The Hero's Tale Inn turned out to be at the very center of town. Following the sheriff's directions, Falcon found and entered the place, disheartened by its very name. Hawk would probably think it was a good omen and never want to leave. Despite the blast of welcome warmth that greeted him as he opened the door, Falcon still felt cold inside as he thought over the sheriff's words. Quickly he closed the door before the late afternoon chill could penetrate the brightly lit room. The main room of the inn was fancier than even the nicest cottages in Alpendorf. The solid wooden tables had elaborate scrollwork carved into them, and each table leg ended in the shape of a bear's paw, as did the legs of each chair. The wooden mantel above the huge brick fireplace was carved to match the tables. A sturdy staircase rose to the hidden upper story, and the odor of cooking herbs warmed the air. A strange feeling surprised Falcon. Nothing about this place was familiar, but in an odd way he felt instantly at home. At that moment, the door at the back of the inn swung open, and Falcon stared in amazement at a man-like cat entered. With a smile of obvious pleasure on its face, the feline innkeeper approached. "Greetings again this evening, young master," he said in a melodious voice. "Your water for the bath is hot, and the tea is properly brewed. A fine feast shall be served when you have rested and are prepared to dine. Come in and shed the cares of your day." Falcon finally found his tongue. "I beg your pardon, but I'm not Hawk," he explained. "I'm Falcon, and my brother is the one who has been staying here." The innkeeper's eyes grew wide as he studied Falcon for a moment. Then he smiled with understanding and delight. "Forgive me, brother of our guest. I did not realize you were not he. You are very much alike, yet unlike your brother. I am Shamin of the Kata people, the host of the Hero Tale Inn, and I am doubly honored by the presence of both you and your great brother." "I'm honored to meet you as well," said Falcon, smiling despite himself. Shamin turned toward the back door. Shima, we have a new guest, he called. Enter and greet the brother of our young adventurer. Falcon felt a bit overwhelmed, and not just from the intense heat of the fireplace. The odd innkeeper acted as though he were a great hero, not a nameless village shepherd. Please, you don't have to do this, Falcon tried to say as the back door opened again and Shima entered with a tray of tea. Shima, it is Falcon, brother of the hawk, declared Shamin with obvious pride. Shima set the tea service down beside Falcon and made a graceful bow of greeting. She then poured a cup of fragrant mint tea and handed it to Falcon with a smile that should by all rights have lit every candle in the room. Thank you, said Falcon, but you needn't be so kind. I'm just here to get Hawk to... Just then the main door burst open. Hawk charged into the room, holding up a coin purse. I just earned 15 Mond, he said jubilantly by way of greeting. Wolfgang only gave me 3 Mond for the first laufer I killed because the skull was half eaten. But now I've got enough to take a sword lesson with the Smearmeister tomorrow. A sword lesson? Was there finally someone here who could teach Hawk to use the weapon he treasured all his life? It didn't matter, Hawk reminded himself. They had to return to Alpendorf before Hawk got himself killed. Hawk, he said softly, don't we need to pay these people for our stay tonight? Hawk's face fell. He seemed to consider it for a moment. Shamin, how much will it cost us if Falcon spends the night? Shamin's ears went back and he looked at the floor. By all rights, it should cost 10 Mond for you both. Hawk interrupted. What if we both stay in the same room? No, replied Shamin with a shake of his head. There are many rooms here, and most lie empty. There is no need for such a sacrifice. Shall we perhaps say 8 Mond? What if Falcon washes the dishes, does the laundry, and brings in the well water in the morning? Hey, interrupted Falcon. Why do I have to be the one? Hey, Hawk snapped. You're the one driving the price up. I didn't ask you to come along and add to my expenses. Young masters, interrupted Shamin, obviously eager to forestall further hostilities. Shall we agree upon 6 Mond? Hawk reached for his money pouch, counting out the coins and handing them to Shamin. There, that's 6. Excellent, young master, replied the Kata. Hawk turned to Falcon, his blue eyes icy. You realize you just cost me a sword lesson, he said. Tomorrow you can muck the Baron's stables first thing, and I'll go hunting. If we hurry, we can maybe earn enough that I can get a lesson before it gets too late. Falcon could see that this wasn't going to be a good time to bring up the journeys home. It would have to wait until Hawk wasn't so angry, and until Falcon didn't feel so guilty about spoiling his brother's chance to learn swordplay. Hawk glared at Falcon one more time, and then turned and strode to the side door. I'm going off to get my bath, he said curtly. The door slammed behind him. There was a moment of silence, then Falcon turned to smile apologetically at Shamin. I'm sorry if my brother seemed discourteous this evening, he said. It's just that he didn't realize I would follow him, so he was surprised to see me. Shamin smiled with understanding. It is of no concern, young master. You will both feel better once you have rested. Are you sure that 6 Mond is enough to pay for all this wonderful hospitality you are providing? Falcon asked with concern. Shamin looked hesitantly at Shima, who replied with a smile and a nod of her head. Somehow, Falcon sensed that she was pleased with more than just the price they had set. She seemed almost honestly glad that Falcon was here. Shamin turned back to Falcon with a smile. If my beautiful Shima believes that this is a fair arrangement, then it must be so. Relax, fine guest, and allow us to favor you with our hospitality. Falcon looked at the kindly faces of the Katas and sighed. He knew exactly how Hawk must be responding to this sort of royal treatment. How could he ever convince him to come home? Ta-da! That is Chapter 4. Two Birds in a Bush.